If there's somebody that you know that could benefit from the information being shared, feel free to share that link. We'll have it. My name is Lori Power. I'm a group benefit consultant. My practice is all about employees and their engagement, their culture as it applies to the benefit plan as a tool that corporations can use to grow and retain their best asset, which is their employees. So part of what started this show wasn't just to connect with incredible people, which I have. Thank you very much for everybody connecting, but it is also to engage with experts in the know, to be able to share that knowledge and expertise with other people so that we can all grow into success. As I mentioned, Susana and I first connected on LinkedIn, and then we've gotten to know one another, virtual coffees. And she is somebody who is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to disability, disability management, and the human side of what people go through when there's a disability claim. Susana, can you take a few moments and just give us a bit of background, where you got started? You have an incredible story.
Yes. I, of course, as you know, I'm the founder and CEO of Bree Matson. I've been around for well over 18 years. However, my path was a different path years ago, obviously. I worked as a special assistant to the president of the Treasury Board, and I worked with Chrétien and Paul Martin within the Treasury Board. And yeah, I was a political strategist, advisor, special assistant to the minister, really, at the end of the day. That's what I did. So it was that experience that gave me the knowledge, if you will, that helped start my company. But the big but was I never planned it. It was a fluke that kind of happened. So, you know, I was working for the minister. You know, I have a family, husband, children, and I was pregnant. I was having another child. And I learned, as you know, through the early trimester that the baby I was carrying had a disability. So that was the beginning of everything for me. So anyways, you know, of course I had my child and all that. And shortly after I had given birth to my little girl, I was on mat leave from working in the parliament, from the Hill, as we called it. And I was invited to a family barbecue, quite an extensive barbecue out in the country, my husband's side of the family. And there was a lady there. I had never met her before, but my husband's side of the family knew her. And she came up to me. She was in a wheelchair. She was hooked up to oxygen. And she came up to me saying, "Oh, are you Jim's wife, the lady who works in government?" And of course, whenever I'd hear that, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to be, you know, here's the talk, you know, they hate Chrétien, or they, you know, so you just sit there, yeah, I know," because you can't really say anything. So I thought, you know, here we go again. But unbeknownst to me, the conversation was very different. She proceeded to explain her horrible experience in working through the Canada Pension Plan Disability and the LTD process. She was on LTD with her employer. The group's benefit provider was at the time Blue Cross. She had horrendous experience in trying to get onto Canada Pension Plan Disability, and all stakeholders involved. It was not a good thing. So she's explaining this to me, and I'm like, what? Like, I was surprised because remember, you know, I was on the other side of the spectrum, you know, working with the government. I was very, very well informed of all the programs. And where I came from, we were the ones who allotted all the money for the departments to do what they need to do to administer these programs. So I knew very well. So here I was on the other side hearing this thinking, what? And I even said to her, I said, "But you're in a wheelchair and you're so sick." She goes, "Yes, I even hired lawyers." She said, "It was awful. At the end of the day," she says, "I never got approved. Eventually, LTD cut me off, and here I am." And you know what? No word of a lie. Something inside of me bubbled up. And I said to her, "You know what? I think I can help you." And she kind of laughed, like, "What can you do?" I said, "Listen, where I came from, the laws of the land originated from there. If you allow, I would be more than happy to look into your situation. We'll do an audit. And if there's something we can do or that I can do, I will do this for you." And she was like, "Oh my goodness, sure." Anyways, that was the beginning. So what ended up happening was we met. And at that time, because her case was CRA, I'm not CRA, Service Canada, well, today's Service Canada, back in the day was HRDC, the file was closed. It had been closed already at that point about 3 years. So I did what we still do today. Not often, of course, it's very unique, exceptional cases, more like the Emergency Wars Act. I'm sorry, I'm not going there. But this is very exceptional in terms of when we implement these measures. So what I did was, what it's called is the ministerial intervention. So I gathered information, went to the minister's office, who was my boss, and I sat down with him and I showed him, I said, listen, I got something I got to show you that I'm just beside myself. I presented it to him and he was appalled. He's like, what? This person's constitutional rights in a way were violated. I said, grossly, in a big way. So anyways, the ministerial intervention works in such a way that the minister, once he sees that it's valuable and there's viability, excuse me, he opened the case. And that allowed me to step in and represent this claimant, and you know, we moved forward. And that's what happened. I stepped in, she signed all the authorization for me to represent her. And I went to the tribunal, fought for her, and I won. And they didn't take long to adjudicate this thing. Like usually it takes weeks, it could take even days for that matter. This one, they judged and came to a conclusion, a decision, hours after we presented our case. And she won just short of $100,000. This was the beginning of me looking at this whole picture saying, okay, there's something very wrong here. And as a result, while I was working on her case, which was a few months, you know, preparing the case and all that, there was a lot of word of mouth that she had shared with, you know, her community, neighbors, the whole deal. And many came to me, just, you know, asking for assistance regarding all kinds of federal disability government programs. So within a year and a half to 2 years, I then brought into the community in benefits and credits about $3.7 million. And it was at that point I realized, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is my calling. So I left the federal government officially and incorporated my company, and the rest is history.
Well, it's history in the making for a lot of people who haven't had a voice. And I love the way you say everybody has a story, and your company takes the time to listen. I think what your story illustrates is how nobody was listening to this person. Nobody gave them the time of day. They perhaps saw the wheelchair, they perhaps saw the disability and made a lot of assumptions. And when you and I first started talking, I looked at it from a benefit perspective and said, you know what, very often when an employee goes off on disability, where's their voice go? Where's the human resources person to represent them? What happens to them? The insurance company will report back to the employer and say, you're approved or not approved. Canada Pension Plan is built right in there to any individual or group policy that it has to coordinate, but who's there to help them?
Exactly. And you know what, the sad fact to what you're saying, Lori, is that is still prevalent today. Unfortunately, where the stakeholders, you know, for 1,001 reasons, are just not equipped to deal with the matter. But I think really step one here in terms of the issues, which what I've noticed was when someone is not able to go back to work, so they're deemed, you know, permanently disabled, they cannot be rehabilitated, it all drops and stops there. And then that's where all the issues arise, where you know, the employer, you know, they're limited in their knowledge in terms of the HR person, the provider, you know, their department, their life disability case managers, they're limited too. I mean, the best that they can do is, you know, give the person, the claimant, you know, the application, and that's if even give them the application, say, okay, just go apply for it, or call Service Canada, they'll help you. And that's not the way to go, because that's where, you know, social responsibility really should, you know, get implemented, holding this person's hand. They're vulnerable, they're ill, they're so stressed in having to deal with their ailment, their medical condition. They don't have the withal to deal with, the can of worms or the Pandora's box, if you will, called, applying for Canada Pension Plan Disability, because it is a daunting process. It's way stringent beyond what LTD, the disability, LTD disability could ever be. So it's a situation that still to this day, it's unfortunate, but we deal with these. Sorry, my daughter has her friends who, so you may hear the girls
Okay,
screaming.
that's life, and you know what? If there's laughter in the background, just makes us happy.
Yeah, thank you for understanding. But yeah, so these are matters that through the years of dealing with providers, working with the claimants, we find, time and time again, for some reason, that's where it stops, and the claimant.
How do most, now I get with when it first started, it's word of mouth. How do most clients come to you now? How do people find you as an advocate to help them?
Yes, well, it's a combination of me reaching out to some providers. It's a combination of that, and or a claimant will come to me individually, and he's, on LTD, he or she is on LTD, and they have to apply for CPP. They found out about me. So when we start working with them, what we do at that point, we contact their provider and say, listen, this is how we can help you. Because at the end of the day, it means more to the provider than in a way to the claimant, because the provider will take back all the retro from CPP if that person's approved. It'll release their disability reserves, and it'll save them future savings, because of the offset. So it's a benefit to them meaning the providers, the insurance providers.
Why is it so hard for Canada Pension Plan? Like, why? I do remember when I first started in the business, and Laura and I have talked about this, Canada Pension Plan at one point was called the rubber stamp. Now, I don't think it was ever truly a rubber stamp, but now it has become so stringent and so hard for people who are deserving. Why do you think that is?
Because the test is very difficult. So the difficult part to it is that the claimant has to be severe and prolonged, okay? And that severity has to be such that they cannot work at all. They have no capacity to be able to, work and provide, an income to sustain themselves. And that test can be very difficult. And I'll tell you why. Besides the actual reality that I'm explaining, it's a difficult test, the other component, meaning a stakeholder that's involved in that process, is the doctor. When doctors fill out those forms, they fill out the forms always with kind of the, bright side of things, like right now my patient is like this, but I'm not too sure what the future may entail, but we are working towards, resolving the situation. When Service Canada reads, reports that state anything even remotely to that kind of a narrative, they deny, because in their mind they're interpreting that as, perhaps in the future, could be near future, this problem will be resolved and this person will be back, to their gainful function, whatever that may be. So they're not qualified. So that is the test, that they are not able to work at all. Like an example I would give is sitting at a desk licking stamps. That would be considered work, but not even having that capacity to do that and having to prove that. That's where it becomes very difficult.
Do you think that they'll start to look at things a little bit different, or do you see that with advocates like you working on behalf of the claimant, that they may look at that and say, this person's unable to have gainful occupation based on their work experience, their salary expectations, their education background? Do you see it evolving in such a way that it becomes more like, I just can't imagine the number of people that fall through the cracks. I really can't. I don't want to.
Yeah, many do. No, in answer to your question, Lori, no, not necessarily them, or there's not, to my knowledge, any changes or modifications, if you will, to the legislation when it applies to the litmus test, if you will, to deem a person eligible or not. That's just the nature of the beast. And that's where the trying aspect, meaning the labor intensive, the dauntingness of the whole thing, is having to prove that. And it becomes more challenging when you're dealing with mental health. That that is just, it's really extreme when it comes to that scenario, because the stakeholders involved are not equipped. Unfortunately, the doctor does his best, but he does it from a very different angle. Then you have the claimant. I mean, they're so consumed, and overburdened with their issue and dilemma, so they're not able to kind of carry that through. And then you're setting up really for more ways than not to have this thing denied. We've seen that over and over and over through the years, unfortunately.
I would think that your team and yourself have to be counselor first, right? You have to be that ear that listens and gets
Yeah,
the full
yeah.
story.
I want to explain a little bit about that, which is very important. One thing that I think has a misconception is, when I'm talking about the services and so forth, people immediately may think, that, oh, it's just filling out a form. If that were the case, I'm going to be very honest, ladies, I'd be in foreign affairs making $280,000 a year fully benefit. I'm sorry. This is a labor of love, and there's a method to this, which brings me to explain that my team consists of very specialized, skilled people. There's myself, who understands the bureaucracy, at the top level. And my team consists of medical practitioners, psychiatric nurses, legal medical practitioners, paralegals, and former retired tribunal judges. So we certainly know what we're doing, but the best part of it all, and I think you here may understand this very important component, is they're all doing this because they love it. And they understand that human element to it. To emphasize, Lori, what you said, we sit there and we listen to the claimant, and we know how to deal with them and work with them, even though they're ill. And a lot of them are ill, unfortunately, and there's a way and a tact that's compassionate with patients and dealing with people who are in these adversarial situations.
I think it's tragic that people who have already been struck by a disability have to somehow not only overcome the judgment of that disability, but defend it by saying, you know what, I am disabled. Like, what could be more heart rendering than to not only have to put your pride aside and say, I am disabled, but then to try to have to prove it over and over and over again. So well done you. Yesterday, we were speaking a little bit about how the pandemic has changed the face of these disability claims as well. Do you mind taking, where you can, take us through a little bit how this pandemic has changed that face of what we see in disability right now?
Right. There is now a rise, an increase, if you will, in people with mental function issues, mental health problems. So that's on the rise. We've seen it. And also, it's a very difficult thing to explain. So people were stunned. Everything kind of went and stopped, as you understand. Everything was at a stop, at a standstill. And then now it's all coming out. And people are now starting to realize, how it's affected them, how it was a trigger to mental health matters and issues, whereas before they never had. It's creating also a lot of talk and buzz, if you will, within the insurance world, group benefits, where people are not able to come back to work, or they have to leave work, they have to take some time out. And so it's creating a lot of disruption, if you will. And my prognosis, if you will, if that's the right word, or my observation is now more so than ever, if the industry, and I mean the HR people, the companies and the insurance providers, if they now do not get their act together and properly address with this in an effective, compassionate, effective way, there's going to be some issues, multi-layered, multi-level issues, and with the government too, because they're going to be overwhelmed with a lot of cases that are being filed. So much so, we are starting now a new service actually that the government has vaccine injury benefits, and we are entering into that market now where we are going to be assisting people who have been vaccine injured to apply for those benefits. And from what I've researched so far, the litmus test is very stringent, because every level, apparently, unlike Canada Pension Plan, every level, and it's multi-level, has a panel that you have to now justify and prove and convince that you're disabled.
Wow. I can't even imagine having to go through the process. I can't imagine going through the process alone without an advocate. What can we do, those of us that are in the industry and those of us that may not be in the industry but know other people? What can we do to help facilitate this move to help others?
Well, that's a good question, Lori. Well, I guess the conversation really can stem from if the organization, the company, the employer really wants to add value in terms of from a benefits perspective, it's important that they look into, after the person is not able to be rehabilitated to go back to work, that person still has value in a life. To be able to carry on further the baton to make sure that person is well looked after and entering into that new phase or new season in life, that is something that would be very, very important to consider. Alternatively, the insurance providers, they should take into consideration and put their money where their mouths are, where when it comes to social responsibility. We understand that the person, cannot go back to work, so now you're not hiring the rehab and, people, and that's okay. Now they have to invest, or at least think about, how can we now still continue to make a difference by exercising social responsibility to help this person now in this other facet of life, because they can't go back to work, where it's meaningful for them, but also meaningful for us meaning the insurance provider, because at the end of the day, it benefits them in terms of return on investment. So those are the kind of points of conversation, that could be had. For too many years, this situation, unfortunately, I hate to say it, is very neglected, still to this day.
Well, we had a situation I had forwarded off to you, although I don't think it was so much a Canada Pension Plan yet situation, but this employee called me. I don't take care of their benefit plan. I'm not quite sure how she got my name, but it was such a privilege to be able to speak to her, because she had been so wrong done by in her disability journey, so to speak. So she, to give a bit of background, she had cancer. She had gone off work. She had returned to work. And they then told her that she was no longer eligible to work because she hadn't worked enough hours the year previous. When she had called different government agencies, they told her that she was not worth their time to continue the conversation. It was absolutely tragic. And not only did she not have an employer to turn to for help, she didn't have any resources. And so out of the blue, like I said, I don't know how she got my name, but I took the time, and she told me at the end of the conversation, she said, at least you listened. I don't have to worry that I'm going crazy. You listened. And that really is the human side of your business, is it not, Susana? Is that you listen.
Oh, we certainly do. And it does make a very big difference. Absolutely. Because like you say, we are vindicating them. We are assuring them and saying to them, this is normal what you're thinking and feeling, but we will be here to take this over for you. And one other thing I want to make clear is when we do take on a case, we take over the whole thing completely. And we report to the claimant as the process moves along and the claimant sits back.
Laurel wants to know, is it only disability claims with Canada Pension Plan or the other government agencies that you work with, or is there a more broad spectrum to other avenue or other aspects of your business?
Yes, that's a good question. We do get involved with other disability programs. We advocate and appeal workers' comp. So we have people, equipped and experienced in that aspect. We do the disability tax credit. That's kind of an off thing, but if it's applicable, we do that, of course, CPPD. And we also deal with, at times, depending on the circumstance, we also deal with long-term disability appeals. So we use, at times, we leverage the Canada Pension Plan disability approval to leverage with the LTD. Very exceptional cases, we don't do it all the time, but we do. We get involved and we're very well versed in that area also.
I have a question, and it's a little bit on the other side. I know personally of a person who's misrepresenting and getting government benefits. I see them walking around the neighborhood all the time, but when they're going to a government meeting, they're suddenly in a wheelchair, blah, 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 blah. This doesn't sit well with me, and I've only recently found out, but I don't know what to do about that. Can you give me any advice on that, Susana?
Can you elaborate a little bit more your question? So if I understood correctly, Patricia, you're saying that there's a representative, a government representative.
No.
I don't quite understand.
That's fine, no problem. I'm sorry. This is just a neighbor. We'll just say a neighbor. And they are on AISH, they're on long-term disability, they're trying to get whatever they can from the government. I know they're perfectly healthy, but I didn't even know they had all these programs that she was on. And I recently found out how she's been getting them. And that feels very uncomfortable for me.
Yes, yes, and that's a very, very good point. And that's why my team of experts, we would never take a file on, number one, without doing a viability check. And there's a process that we go through. That's number one. And when we do take on a file, we take it on knowing that if we had to go through all levels up to the tribunal hearing, we know we have it. It's not about filling out a form.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be viable. They have to be true to the test, because one of the processes when we take on a case is the claimant gives us full authorization for us to communicate with the medical practitioner or practitioners, and we get it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will, the whole history as to what the prognosis is, any treatment plans, medication, and so forth. So if that person, for whatever reason, hypothetically, does not pass that litmus test in the sense of this is not a severe and prolonged scenario, so we really don't have a case here, and we're not going to be taking this on, then we state such. Now, in this case with this lady or this person, yeah, we do hear of people like that. I personally don't know how they go about and do that, but yes, it's unfortunate. It's a reality that there may be people like that. Now, from what I understand, is if the government comes to the knowledge, I'm talking Service Canada or CRA, I can't speak for other entities, and of course workers' comp too. I do understand that if it comes to their knowledge that they investigate, because they suspect, and they investigate, they do have the authority and the power, of course, to terminate. So
all fraudulent claims like that, Pat, there's I think they spend a lot more money, and correct me if I'm wrong, Susana, there's a lot of money that's put into investigators. So they actually invest a lot into investigators.
Yes.
If you know there's a fraudulent claim or what appears to be a fraudulent claim, they've got a host of lines just waiting for your call, and they will act right away in that. One last question for you as we come to time. Craig had said fees. So there was a question on who pays you, knowing that the disability claimant, they're fighting for their money anyway. So we wanted to know whether it was a percentage of the back pay from Canada Pension Plan, or is it from the insurer? So how does your team get paid?
Yes, so when we come into a service agreement, let's say Wawanisa, hypothetically. So Wawanisa will be the client that will pay us. And our fees would be, there's an intake fee. We need to have an intake fee to do a viability check. And this goes, Patricia, to your point. We do viability checks. We see that it passes that litmus test. If the case is viable, then there's a retainer for us to then build the case, because it's all hands on deck and we move forward. And also there's a contingency fee based on one-time retro payment. We have a fee attached to that, a percentage. So there's an intake, retainer, and a percentage fee.
Now we will need to do this again, Susana. So I'm just going to put it out there that we're going to have episode 2 on this, because there's a lot more to go into. So for today, what's the best avenue for the experts in the room here to connect with you?
Oh, definitely through LinkedIn or email. Those two ways of connecting with me are good. I always have my phone with me, so I would love to connect and get to know everybody. And it's good that we keep the conversation going. I think it's a great thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate the knowledge that you share so willingly. And thanks to everybody for coming in. It's always, I say every week, it's always the fastest half hour of the week for me. And I didn't have to worry, Pat, today about technology working or not working. So that was a good thing. We had a good signal.